Welcome. I'm Teresa Nelson of the League of Women Voters of Oakland. The League is a trusted, nonpartisan political organization encouraging informed and active participation in government. We neither support nor oppose any party or political candidates. Thank you for joining us this evening. Tonight's session will be taped on KTOP, and it will appear online as well as on YouTube. Please check the broadcast schedule on our website. This forum will give you the chance to meet both of the candidates running for the position of the 18th Assembly District. They will be on your ballot for the November 6th general election. Our format for these forums is a modified debate format. Each candidate will be given 1.5 minutes for an opening statement. The order of speaking has been determined by a lot drawing. During the opening statements, volunteers from the League of Women Voters of Oakland will collect written questions submitted by the audience. Please write your questions on the cards and hold them in the air for the question collector to collect. The question sorters will then sort them to help ensure that a wide variety of issues will be covered. Due to our limited time, we will probably not be able to ask every question submitted, but we will do as many as we can. Each candidate will answer each question and will have 1 minute to respond. The order of answering will be rotated based on the opening order. At the end of the overall question period, each candidate will be allowed 1 minute for a closing statement in the reverse of the opening order. In the interest of fairness and equal allocation of time, the League has timers who will time each answer, and the time limits will be enforced. The timekeepers will signal candidates with a yellow sign marked 30 seconds and a red card when the speaker's time is expired. During the question and answer period, we ask that those in the audience not respond by clapping, commenting, or making other noise to the candidates' answers or questions, but you are most welcome to respond to their closing statements. And this would be a good time to turn off cell phones or other devices that will make noise during the forum. I want to thank our question sorters, Louise Anderson, Catherine Gavsey, and Judy Merrill, our question collector, Polly Amrine, and our timers, Christopher Hadley and Jerry Merrill, all from the League of Women Voters. Now let me introduce the candidates for the 18th Assembly District in the order in which they will be speaking. First will be Mr. Abel Guillen, and second will be Mr. Rob Bonta. The first opening statement will be made by Mr. Guillen, and he will have 1.5 minutes. Mr. Guillen.
Thank you so much. Whoops, had to turn on the mic there. It's been my pleasure to have been a member of the League of Women Voters of the Oakland chapter for about the last 10 years. Very happy to be here today to share with you my credentials and why I'm running for the California State Assembly. As you said, my name is Abel Guillen, and I'm a trustee currently serving my second term at the Peralta Community College District. At the Peralta Colleges, we serve over 30,000 students a year at Laney, Merritt, College Alameda, Berkeley City College. I'm running for state assembly because my story, I think, is typical of many other Californian stories and an American story. My family came here. My mom was a refugee from Nicaragua, and she came here to seek a better life. My dad, my grandfather came over as a bracero during the as a farm worker to pick California's crops when there was a labor shortage, and they met here and made the life. I'm proud to say that because of good union jobs, I became the first in my family to graduate from college, and now I'm running for the state assembly because I want to make sure other Californians have that same opportunity. My campaign is focused on education, healthcare for all Californians, infrastructure improvements, and making sure we have a fair tax system here in California. I look forward to your questions, and I hope that you'll stand with teachers, nurses, the Sierra Club in support of my campaign.
Thank you, Mr. Guillen. Mr. Bonta.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson. Thank you to the League of Women Voters of Oakland. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and thank you for your ongoing commitment to good government, to voter education, and to transparency. I'm Rob Bonta. I'm the Vice Mayor of the City of Alameda. I'm very honored to be the endorsed candidate of the California Democratic Party and the current incumbent for the seat, Assemblymember Sandre Swanson. I am also a commissioner on the Alameda County Transportation Commission. I'm a deputy city attorney in the San Francisco City Attorney's Office, and I'm a former director on the Alameda Healthcare District Board. I'm running for State Assembly to continue the fight for justice and progress that my parents began and passed on to me. They were United farm worker organizers with the United Farm Workers. They worked directly with Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta. And I grew up in the headquarters of La Paz, where the United Farm Workers movement began. And I have continued to pursue pursue progress and justice in my professional career and as a public servant. I decided to run for Assembly last July because no candidate in this race was either talking effectively enough about or talking at all about the issues that I cared about most. That is how to build strong public schools, how to keep our streets safe and for our children, and how to bring jobs back to the East Bay. And nowhere is that more important than in Oakland. The first thing I'd like to do here at the League of Women Voters Forum is, if Mr. Guillen would join me, is pledge to run a positive campaign on the issues and to not attack my opponent's character or take his public record out of context. I think we should encourage our outside supporters to do the same, and I'd like to know if Mr. Guillen will take that pledge. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ponta. And now we will move into the audience questions. We have quite a few, and we will do as many of them as we can. Let me begin first with a question about the Affordable Health Care Act, which has begun to be phased in. There are a number of aspects to this. What do you see as the important impacts and changes for this in California, and particularly what challenges and financial challenges may it present as the implementation continues over the years ahead? Mr. Bonta, will begin with you.
Thank you. I'm honored to have the support of many important groups in the healthcare arena because of my commitment to healthcare and to healthcare for all and to universal healthcare, including the California Nurses Association, doctors, and emergency physicians, among many others. I was a former, as I mentioned, director of the Alameda Healthcare District. One of our key jobs was to provide quality healthcare services to the community. We ran an emergency room, we ran an acute care facility, and we ran a skilled nursing facility. The rollout of the Affordable Health Care Act presents great potential and also challenges. How the healthcare exchanges will be used and whether they will be able to help patients in the way they're designed to do is going to be an important test. I think that providing more coverage to more Californians is absolutely important, and I think the promise and the potential is there. Some of the key components, like no more cutting off people from their health care, is going to be critical, and I see my time has ended, so I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Guillen.
I think the Affordable Care Act is a positive step in the right direction. I'm proud to have been endorsed by the California Nurses Association for my commitment to Medicare for all. While I think Affordable Care Act is a step in the right direction, it doesn't go far enough. We need to make sure that every single Californian and every single American has access to what I see as a human right, and that's Medicare for all. Some of the challenges coming up in the Affordable Care Act is that not everybody is covered. And there's certainly some positives in the insurance companies will no longer be able to deny you coverage because of a pre-existing condition. That's certainly positive. We're already starting to see some of the benefits. Young people who are up to 25 years old will be able to be covered as well. But we need to really get to a system from that day that you're born, that you get a Medicare card, till the day that you die, that you're able to go anywhere in the United States and be able to be afforded which I think is a human right, affordable health care coverage like they do in other industrialized countries.
Thank you, Mr. Guillen. Next question has to do with education, and there are several questions, so I'm going to combine them. Leaders in the state legislature always say that education is one of their highest priorities, but fees for higher education go up. Community colleges and K-12 schools constantly face cuts. What specific plan do you have to help improve K-12 and post-secondary education? And are you in favor of making educational opportunities available to children of undocumented immigrants? And we'll begin with Mr. Guillen.
Thank you for the question. The reason why I first got into public service and why I've dedicated the last 10 years of my life working as a financial advisor to California public schools and community colleges is for that very reason. I'm the first in my family to graduate from college, and I grew up in a system where there was actually resources available, outreach program, and opportunities were afforded to California's young folks. Today, we're 47th out of 50th in education funding. This graduating class that just finished this past June has known nothing but budget cuts the last 12 years, and it's time that we stop that. I think one effective way of making sure that we have good funding for education is that we close the tax loopholes. We need to enact oil severance tax to make sure that the big oil companies pay their fair share. That could raise at least $1 billion for higher education. And then we need to look at our unequal tax system, starting with Proposition 13. Proposition 13 started the decline of our education system and our social service safety net here in California. So those are the two places that I would start.
Thank you. Mr. Bonta.
Thank you. As a public school father and a father of three, public education and public schools will always be a top priority for me. We have absolutely gone in the wrong direction. California used to lead in the past. The only thing we're leading right now is the race to the bottom. We've gone from one of the top 10 states in the country in per pupil school funding now to almost dead last. At number 47, one of my top priorities is going to be fully funded schools. And my record speaks for itself. I helped raise $84 million for East Bay Public Schools. I stood up with teachers across the state, suing Arnold Schwarzenegger in the state of California for chronically underfunding our schools. We need to get our schools fully funded and accessible to all. I think the Middle Class Scholarship Act, which did not pass in this last session, should be brought back and tried again to make higher education accessible to more students. And I also think I do support the DREAM Act and access to our schools, public schools for undocumented immigrants. So I think that my time is over.
Thank you. Next question will begin with you, Mr. Bonta. This has to do with public safety. What plans do you have from the state perspective that will help improve public safety in Oakland? And do you have ideas about what can be done about younger and younger children in the juvenile justice system, alternatives for juvenile incarceration, and addressing recidivism rates?
Thank you. I believe that public safety is one of the top issues in this district. I'm the only candidate who's talked about public safety throughout this campaign, and I think it's absolutely critical that we address the public safety issue. I'm honored because of my commitment to public safety to have the endorsements of every single public safety organization that's gotten involved in this race, and I have never cut public safety core services, police patrol, fire suppression, or emergency medical response because it's so important. I have talked in the past about a specific plan that I have for how the state can help with public safety here in the district, and that is the following. I call it an emergency prevention fund. I believe that the state needs to take responsibility for public safety issues across the state and in the district, and the Public Safety Prevention Fund would create a fund of resources to help fund prevention officers in qualifying areas, qualifying districts and cities where, because of budget cuts, they've lost prevention officers and there's been a consequent and attendant spike in violent crime. So I do have a very specific plan for how to address public safety here in the district and in California. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gann.
Thank you for the question. Public safety is one of the top issues in this district, not only facing our community, but communities across the state and the nation. One of the things that I would do as a state assembly member is try to figure out how to leverage the resources at the state level to bring those resources here where we need them. One of the big issues facing our police department here in Oakland is the fact that they have a backlog on fingerprinting and ballistics. And what I would do as assembly member is work with the Attorney General's office to make sure that they take a brunt of that responsibility to help our department here locally process those ballistics and fingerprintings to make sure that we solve cases that have gone unsolved for months and months. That can be done quickly, and it can be done by collaborating with other agencies. That's been my consistent focus as a trustee over the last 6 years. I've been able to connect the dots between different agencies to deliver services and get things done for our community.
Thank you. The next question has to do with campaign financing. The Disclose Act for fair campaign financing passed the Assembly but could not get through the Senate in this most recent session. Many people believe that disclosure of the sources of funding of political ads would restore public faith in politics. Will you support the Disclose Act when it reemerges in the Assembly in this next session? And we'll begin with you, Mr. Guillen.
Thank you for the question. Disclose Act is a very important act, and I'd like to first start off with letting you know that as a trustee at the Peralta Community College District, I instituted a series of financial reforms, one of which was to make sure that above and beyond what's required by the state, that trustees actually disclose relationships with vendors that they may have with the district or any future vendors, and with their filings on an ongoing basis. This is a lot stricter than what is at the state level, and that's what I would propose to do up in Sacramento. I would be fully in support of the Disclose Act because I think money, we need to show it the light of day, and I appreciate the advocacy efforts that the League of Women Voters has shown over the years in this particular area.
Thank you, Mr. Guillen. Mr. Bonta.
Yes. I'm already on record as an endorser of the Disclose Act. I've worked with the League of Women Voters in Alameda and signed on as an endorser proudly. I think it's absolutely critical to make sure that we have transparent campaign finance laws, that the funding behind campaign efforts is shown the light of day and fully disclosed. So not only would I support it, but I have already supported it and am on record in supporting the Disclose Act. And I want to thank the League of Women Voters for its ongoing effort to promote good government. Something else that we did in Alameda in conjunction with the League of Women Voters was we helped put together a very groundbreaking sunshine ordinance that goes even beyond what the Brown Act requires. In fact, it gives 4 times the notice for public meetings, for example, than the Brown Act. So very exciting, and I look forward to continuing to work with the League of Women Voters to promote good government. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bonta. And we'll start then the next question with you on the California state budget. Lots of questions on this, so I'll try to roll them into a single related question because it's a big topic. What we'd like to find out is what your thoughts are about how to ensure a balanced budget, your priorities both for social programs and for revenue sources such as restoring the vehicle license fee. So we'll begin with you, Mr. Bonta.
Thank you. The budget is one of the most important issues, if not the most important issue, and one of the most difficult as well. The first thing I'd say is that we are facing a very difficult structural problem that needs to be addressed and fixed, hopefully in the term of the next set of legislators, and that is the 2/3 requirement to raise revenue in this state. We got halfway there with the 50% plus 1 requirement to pass a budget, a balanced budget, but we have not addressed the revenue component yet. We need to address that. My top priorities are public schools, public safety, jobs in the economy, and social services that protect our seniors, our children, and the sick. And those priorities have always been reflected in my actions as a public servant and will continue to be in the Assembly. I think that we can do 2 things to help on the revenue side to work towards a balanced budget. One is increasing and growing our tax base by stimulating our economy, and I'm proud to have the endorsement of the California Small Business Association because of my commitment to the business community and creating more jobs that will increase our sales tax revenue and our personal income tax revenue. We can also raise taxes like the oil extraction tax to generate more revenue for the services we care about most.
Thank you. Mr. Guillen.
I think our tax system is unfair, particularly to low-income individuals and working-class individuals. Today, Californians who make less than $20,000 a year pay about 10.4% of their income in state and sales taxes, income and sales taxes, while Californians who make over $2.3 million a year actually pay less than 7.4% of their income in sales taxes and income taxes. So we need to look at the fundamental inequalities of our tax system and figure out where those loopholes are, why they exist, and make sure we create a fair system of taxation. The budget of California is a reflection on values. I want to make sure that our budget is a reflection of equality, fairness, and making sure that those that are most vulnerable have protections, that they're not being overtaxed.
Thank you, Mr. Guillen, and we'll start with you on this next question then, which has to do with state parks. The governor's budget includes closures of some state parks to save money, which may still be necessary despite the discovery of unspent funds due to the restrictions. What is your position on these state park closures? What will you do to help keep state parks open and safe for everyone?
Thank you for the question. California does have a great system of state parks, and it's actually a large tourist draw. Yeah, it brings in money to the state of California, and certainly we need to do whatever we can to keep our state parks open. I'm heartened about some of the relationships that have been formed, spurred by the Friends of the California Parks and others, where we've actually partnered with nonprofit institutions to actually manage and take care of some of the parks that we have in place. There's some good examples, and I think that's a good start to make sure that we keep our parks open. But certainly we need to make sure that all our parks are open, and I would look at further exploring those types of partnerships that exist, and certainly working with organizations like the Sierra Club and the League of Conservation Voters, both of who have endorsed my candidacy for that reason, because they know that I'll be a champion for the environment and making sure that our parks are accessible by the entire public.
Thank you, Mr. Gann. Mr. Bonta.
Thank you. I think we are lucky in California to have a beautiful system of state parks. And it's also very unfortunate that we have the budget problems that we've been facing and that I've discussed earlier with our inability to raise revenues. I think that there's a couple plans that I would have to help make sure that we continue to have a robust park system that's open and available to all of our users. One is we should consider having the users increase their payment for use. That would help alleviate some of the pressure on the public funding system, but still allow for ongoing access. And it can be a tiered rate so that everyone would continue to have access based on their own resources and abilities. Partners and foundations to help continue to parks is also very important. And I'm very honored because of my commitment to open space and to parks and protection of parks and open space to have the endorsement of the California League of Conservation Voters. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bonta. You'll start with the next question then again. Please tell us your stance on gay marriage and related topics such as adoption in gay and lesbian families.
I am extremely honored to have the support of the LGBT community in this race, particularly the East Bay Stonewall Democratic Club as an exclusively endorsed candidate for this race. I'm very proud to work in the San Francisco City Attorney's Office, where we were on the cutting edge fighting for marriage equality, overturning Prop 8 as unconstitutional. We were in the middle of that battle, and I'm proud to be part of that office. I support marriage equality. I support the full spectrum of equality and access and justice. I was proud to be a supporter of a curriculum in our public schools in Alameda called Lesson 9, which provided teachings on all diverse and different forms of family units and family structures, including gay couples and gay families. And so I fully support the full spectrum of LGBT rights, and I'm proud to have the support of the LGBT community as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gann.
Marriage equality is a human right, and I'm very honored to have the exclusive statewide endorsements of Equality California, the Victory Fund, the California Legislative LGBT Caucus, and I hope to become a member of that caucus when I get to Sacramento. I'm very much in support of adoption rights for parents. I think every child who is seeking adoption, who is willing, and parents, regardless of who they are willing to adopt a child, should have that opportunity. And I'm glad that we have that opportunity here in California, but we need to protect that ability. I plan on being an advocate in Sacramento for marriage equality and make sure that the state, the Democratic Party of the U.S. has adopted that platform into their platform, and I hope that we encourage to continue that dialogue so that everyone can be respected for who they are as a human being.
Thank you. And Mr. Guillen, we'll begin with you with the next question on affordable housing. What should the state's role be in providing affordable housing? What do you see as your role in directing state resources to develop affordable housing in your district?
Thank you for the question. Our state has largely relied on redevelopment funds for the purpose of building affordable housing here in California. Unfortunately, redevelopment funds have been eliminated, as we all know. And I think our job as state policymakers is try to figure out how to direct policy so that that is in tandem with principles around SB 375. So that includes policies that encourage transit-oriented development so that we limit any urban sprawl that were to take place, and that we make sure that we do whatever we can at the state level to make sure that we go after the Community Reinvestment Act, to make sure that large banks are held accountable and making sure that they're making the proper investments in California for affordable housing. That's going to be coming up for renewal in the not too far future, and I think that's one vehicle that we can take to see how much more teeth that we can put into that legislation to make affordable housing more of a reality here in California.
Thank you. Mr. Bonta.
Thank you. We need to ensure that we have the full range of housing opportunities for everyone in our community, that there is affordable housing for all members of our community of all backgrounds and socioeconomic status. And that's being made more difficult these days, unfortunately. One of the biggest creators of affordable housing was redevelopment funds. And as a vice mayor, a city council member, we used redevelopment funds to build affordable housing in our own city to make housing available to all members of our community. And now that's gone. So one of the priorities that I would have would be to find a replacement source of funding for what we've lost. Because a lot of people, including myself, do talk about the job creation opportunities that were lost because of redevelopment funding, but one of the biggest losses has been for affordable housing. We need to use the mandates of SB 375 to build transit-oriented developments. We need to honor ABAG's regional housing allocation numbers to build the housing that is necessary, and that's something that we just went through in the city of Alameda. We honored the state laws to make our commitment to affordable housing.
Thank you. And we'll start again with you with the question about job creation. What concrete steps or accomplishments have you achieved to help promote jobs for working people in this district? Or what projects or programs will you propose that will help create jobs for working people all across this district of all ages and all demographics?
Job creation and economic revitalization has been a priority for me, as I mentioned in my earlier comments, and I'm very proud of the successes we've had and I've had in that arena. One example is the development of Alameda Point, a third of the island, largest infill project in the East Bay, over approximately 1,000 acres. And we just got that property conveyed from the Navy by working with the Obama administration to the city, and it will create over 9,000 good permanent jobs for East Bay residents. It will create another thousands of jobs during the build-out phase. I have a specific idea of creating a carve-out for redevelopment funds for former military properties. That would help economic development and job creation right here in this district, at Oakland Army Base, at Alameda Point, at Oak Knoll Naval Hospital, by encouraging private development dollars to come to those properties with tax increment financing. I think we should also create access to capital for small businesses in California so that new firms can be created and have low interest loans be available to them. That will create more jobs. 80% of the of jobs that are created are from small businesses.
Thank you. Mr. Guillen.
Thank you for the question. Just this week, I was talking to a small business owner that was telling me about the rising cost of healthcare and how that's impeding him hiring new employees. I think if we go back to a system of Medicare for all and take the big insurance companies out of healthcare, I think that will allow more local businesses to hire more employees, and that's number one. Number two, my work as a California Community College trustee, I'm very proud of the fact that California community colleges are the economic backbone of our economic development system here in California. As a community college trustee, I've been able to secure over $20 million in career and job training grants that put people back to work. And in this economy, now more than ever, we need to retrain our workers for the jobs of today. California's unemployment rate is still 10.4%. And if you look a little bit deeper, you look at particular communities, you look at the African American community, for example, it's about 17%, Latino community is about 15%, and those numbers are unacceptable.
Thank you, Mr. Gannon. We'll start with you with this next question. Do you support Proposition 34, which would end capital punishment in California? If so, why? If not, why not?
I do support Proposition 34, and I'm a strong supporter of that because, quite frankly, our penal system is out of whack, and it's inhumane. We spent, I think, a total of $7 billion over the last 30 years since the death penalty was reenacted for 13 people, 13 individuals. It's a costly system that doesn't work, and a more humane way of dealing with this is life in prison. So I've signed on to supporting Prop 34 for that very reason. Not only is it because the right thing to do, but from an economic standpoint, those are funds that we use. There's about $500 million that we use every year in dealing with the death penalty. That's money that we can use to put public safety officials back on the street, to invest in crime prevention programs for our youth. So those funds can be better used in that matter.
Thank you. Mr. Bonta.
I do support Proposition 34 for both moral reasons and for financial reasons. The death penalty has proven to have a disparate racial impact on racial minorities, and in addition, it has proven in the past to be fallible, that is, to be wrong. And Illinois, for example, had a moratorium on the death penalty for that very reason, because of the findings of inaccurate impositions of the death penalty. So when you have a final punishment like the death penalty, you can't be wrong. Finally, it will save about $180 million a year. We actually spend a great deal of money on folks that are on death row and never actually put them to death. It becomes very expensive. Life without parole is an absolutely fine response and sentence and punishment, and that money can be redirected towards reentry programs, job training, reducing recidivism. I think it's a better use of the funds.
Thank you. And then we'll begin with you for this next question about actually working at the state government level. The problems of partisan deadlock and gridlock at the state level seem fairly apparent. Do you support any structural changes in state government that would help end this? How will you get things done and accomplished for this district?
That's a great question, and I think people do rightfully find disappointment in the gridlock that's up in Sacramento, and I think I would do what I've done up to this point, which is to work collaboratively with my colleagues, find common ground, be open-minded, listen, compromise, to find common ground to move the agenda forward. I think that's what we need to do. We need people that are going to work together. We need people who are reasonable. We don't need people who are so ideological that they close their ears and don't listen. We need to move this state forward. The Californians deserve more. And when I got onto the city council in Alameda, the city council was essentially broken. It wasn't working with itself. It wasn't working with its staff. That's similar to how people see Sacramento today. So there's a couple of good things in play, 12-year now, and also the open primary, which I think can conspire together to create some wonderful opportunities for legislators to work together in California and turn the state around, which is direly and desperately needed.
Thank you. Mr. Guillen.
Thank you for the question. I've actually worked in state government. I've worked in the state legislature, so I know how the process works from the beginning of session, putting bills together, and the entire legislative process. There's certainly room for improvement. First of all, I would start with looking at the 2/3 requirement for tax revenue increases. 2, I think it makes sense to explore the possibility of a 2-year budget cycle. That will allow more time for state agencies, particularly school districts, community colleges, the creatures of the state who are dependent on state funding, more time for planning. That would also allow our agencies to really examine, to take a hard look at what programs actually are working, what's successful, and what's not working through an audit process. So I think if we change our system to 2-year cycle, 1 year can be spent on an audit process for government programs, and then the second year can be actually spent on legislating and the budget.
Thank you. And the next question is returning to the subject of campaign spending limits and campaign finance. Would you agree, we'll begin with you, Mr. Guillen, would you agree to accept lower campaign spending limits in order to reduce the influence of money in political campaigns?
I would, and I actually think that as a matter of principle, we ought to have publicly funded elections. I think it's very difficult for the average person to get involved in politics, how much money is involved in politics to even run for office. And I think in order to level the playing field, there's a lot of good people out there who would make good public servants. Their only deterrent is that they can't raise the money to get involved in the political process. And make no doubt about it, politics and money are tied together. And so any steps that we can take to lower the cost of running for office. I was a big supporter of publicly financed campaigns. Unfortunately, that was an initiative that didn't get very far. And I'd like to see that reinstituted and have us take a good, strong look at it. Other states like Arizona and I believe Maine have looked at state-wide public financing models that have actually allowed more minorities, more women, more people of color to participate in the civic process. That's not the case now. In our California legislature, less women now than there were even 5 years ago, and I think that's wrong.
Thank you, Mr. Bonta.
I would accept lower spending limits. I also think that given the legal regime that we operate in, we need a more comprehensive approach to campaign finance reform to allow more individuals to step up and serve in public service and in government, and also to allow others to be part of the process. We need a government that is open, transparent, accessible, and serves the people. A couple of Supreme Court cases make that very difficult. Buckley versus Vallejo says that money is speech, and unlimited amounts of money can be spent on independent expenditures and also on the wealthy self-funding their campaigns. Citizens United says corporations are people and allows corporations to spend enormous amounts of money, and we're seeing that today with super PACs and in other ways. We need a constitutional amendment or a new Supreme Court decision to overrule Citizens United and to remove that corporate influence. And we also need to make sure we kill Proposition 32 to allow working people to continue to have a voice in our government.
Okay, and this will be our last question in order to end on time, and we'll begin with Mr. Bonta. The East Bay is known to be a very politically active area. Both of you have, the questioner writes, both of you have solid progressive backgrounds. What do you feel are the most important qualities for a progressive politician? What makes you feel you're really ready to assume state office, and how do you differentiate yourself from your opponent? We'll begin with you, Mr. Bonta.
I think the key component for a progressive Democrat like myself is to take responsibility for the ongoing fight for justice, for social justice, for economic justice, for racial justice. My parents started that in my life, passed that torch to me. I've carried it proudly in my professional life and my public life. There are many places where injustice continues, and we need to have someone who's ready to step up. My record speaks for itself. I represented the ACLU pro bono to help end racial profiling by the California Highway Patrol. I've taken on big alcohol companies for marketing alcohol to youth. I've taken on insurance companies for underfunding general hospitals and public hospitals. I've stood up for what was right, not what was easy. And that's what progressive Democrats have to do. That's what I've done. That's what we need to continue to do. I've also stood up for a prevailing wage ordinance so that working people are given a prevailing wage in the East Bay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Guillen.
Thank you for the question. I have a long track record of standing up for what's right. I was an undergrad at UC Berkeley, and I fought and got arrested to defend affirmative action. I fought against Prop 187 and Prop 209 because I saw that as an inherent closing of opportunity. As a student activist, I carried that on in my professional work. For the last 10 years, I've worked as a school financial advisor where I've raised $2.5 billion for California schools, actually bringing resources to underfunded schools all up and down California, oftentimes against big interests. I'm very proud of that. As a trustee, I actually have a track record the last 6 years where I've been on the front lines dealing with our community college students, fighting for what's right. I took on the big banks when nobody else wanted to. I saw what the banks were doing to our community college system and our students who are part of that. And when I found that they were charging exorbitant fees and not playing by the rules, I took our community colleges' money out of those big banks and moved them into local community colleges and credit unions to make sure that money gets reinvested locally. We need someone in Sacramento that's going to stand up and make sure to fight for what's right and not quiver.
Thank you. And now the candidates will make their 1-minute closing statements. The order of speaking will be the reverse of the opening statements. So Mr. Bonta will begin. Mr. Bonta.
Thank you. Thanks again for the opportunity to be here. I'm running for California State Assembly to improve our public schools, to ensure we have safe streets, and to make sure that we have more prosperous communities. As a public school father, as I mentioned, I work with teachers and parents to help make sure that we stop the chronic underfunding of our schools. I've also worked to prevent financial institutions from using predatory lending practices on the working poor in our state. And I've worked to promote job creation, revitalization, and to attract new businesses and new jobs to the East Bay. I would be honored to serve as the next Assembly member. And before I even got into elected public office, I had worked in urban communities. I lived and worked in public housing neighborhoods with African-American teenage boys in New Haven, Connecticut, with the homeless in the Latino community in East Los Angeles. And this is an ongoing continuance of my work, my fight for social justice and progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bonta. Mr. Guillen.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. I was born and raised here in the Bay Area, product of local public schools. My dad's a baker. He still is trying to secure his retirement. He's been there for 39 years at the Hilton Hotel. My mom is a cook at a convalescent home caring for the elderly. And because of the great education system that we had, I was able to go on and become the first in my family to graduate from college. I'm running because I want to make sure other Californians have that same opportunity. We know that good jobs lead to good education leads to good jobs leads to a better economy and a safer community. And we need someone with experience and track record. I've been there. I've been doing that for the last 6 years at the Community College District, where I have a track record of providing an AC transit pass for our students, saving them over $1,000 a year. I built a Peralta Health and Wellness Center that increases access to 30,000 students for previously uninsured students at our school district. And I've instituted serious financial reforms and transparency clauses to make sure that government functions well. Thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening.
And on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Oakland, I want to thank both of our candidates for participating in this forum tonight and for choosing to run for this important office. For more information about the candidates and the measures that will be on your November 6th ballot, please visit the League's award-winning website, www.smartvoter.org. There you'll find the candidates' web pages, descriptive information about the ballot measures, links to other sources of information, and the location and directions to your polling place. Again, the site is smartvoter.org. Tonight's forum was taped for broadcast by KTOP and will be rerun several times in the weeks before the election. The schedule for these showings can be found on the City of Oakland's website, oaklandnet.com, in the lower right-hand corner of the homepage, on the KTOP schedule published in the Oakland Tribune Daily, and new this year, on YouTube, which you can reach via smartvoter.org. In closing, let me say that the men and women who are members of the League of Women Voters do hands-on work to safeguard democracy. We're directly involved in shaping the important issues to keep our community strong. If you would like to join us, please call our office at 510-834-7640 or visit our website, www.lwvoakland.org. There you'll also find who represents Oakland, a handy guide to every office that represents us at every level, federal, state, local, and special districts. Please remember to vote. Register by October 22nd if you're not already registered to vote, and come to the polls on November 6th or vote in advance by mail. Encourage your family, friends, and neighbors to register and vote also. Thank you and good evening.